Let's take another question that you've sent in to us. Brian McGill says, in the event of Scotland voting to become an independent country, how confident would Scotland be of remaining in the European Union? And what guarantees could the SNP give that Scotland can afford to go it alone and not become a high-tax country like Denmark and other Scandinavian nations? Well, Willie Rennie, I mean, you're big fans of the European Union. If it happened, and we know you don't want it to happen, wouldn't the European Union welcome Scotland with open arms?
I think there would be quite a challenge. I don't think it would be automatic. I think there is an issue about the sequencing, as we've just discussed, about exactly when that would be happening. There is an issue about the deficit and the debt that Scotland would have and whether that complies with the European Union rules. So I think there is quite a significant degree of doubt. But the even more challenging thing in those circumstances is that Alex Salmond's plan for independent Scotland was about a gradual separation over time. If you've got the rest of the United Kingdom outside the European Union and Scotland wanting to be inside the European Union, that gradual approach of that gradual separation over time does not work. The border becomes a real big issue. That's where the issue around about the currency, which we now understand that the SNP are in utter turmoil as to what the currency would be as a result of the interview yesterday with the First Minister. So there are big questions, and would potentially only be months away from that independence referendum. So they can't even decide on that now. How on earth can we decide on questions like the European Union?
If it did happen, you would be campaigning as a representative of the Liberal Democrats in Scotland. You would be campaigning to join there, wouldn't you?
I mean, I never accept that we'll be an independent country, and I will argue every step of the way to stop that. And I would never like to contemplate the circumstances of us being at, because I think the challenges that the country would face would be enormous. And we would never get to the big issues and the big challenges that the country faces, like the climate emergency, mental health services, and the quality of our education. Let's focus on those things rather than this interminable debate about independence.
And it'll be the same for Scottish Labour, wouldn't it? I mean, if you were leading an independent Labour Party in Scotland, you would want to join the European Union.
Well, look, Adam, 4 times as many jobs in Scotland are dependent on our economic and monetary union with the UK compared to the rest of the European Union. So our domestic market is the UK domestic market, and to break away from that would cause severe economic dislocation. And I don't think
so. You'd be remaining. You'd be saying, "Want to rejoin the European Union."
I want to remain. I want to remain and reform both the UK and the European Union. There is a particular issue with the latest plans the SNP have got for their currency, which is they say they want to be part of a sterling area without being part of the UK anymore, so that they would be the holders of a currency over which they would have no governance. And I think the European Union may have a view on things like that. And there is the point which Willie has made about the terms of any entry for a new member state require the public deficit to be driven down. And that goes to my point earlier, Adam, that the prospectus for independence is built upon a decade of austerity, or even a 5-year, even greater shock-style austerity if the SNP conference is to be gone by. So I think there is a big challenge for anybody who's a proponent of the creation of a separate Scottish state, both economically and fiscally.
I mean, presumably the logic of Scottish Conservatives would be even an independent Scotland better off out.
Well, look, I mean, an independent Scotland, as we talked about earlier, will struggle financially. There are still so many unanswered questions about Scottish independence. And the same questions we're having on the debate today, has been having over the last few days, are the same questions people were asking of the SNP in 2014 and before the independence referendum. None of those questions have been answered, be it currency, be it divergence of immigration policy, where it's the UK out of Europe and Scotland trying to go back into it. The SNP want to drag Scotland back into things like the common fisheries policy, reintroduce free movement of people. And this is going to create substantial issues. And Richard's right, the UK economy is worth so much more to Scotland at the moment, and that needs to be protected at all costs.
How long do you think it would take to get back in?
I think my 3 friends here seem to be auditioning for Ebenezer Scrooge. Look, at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that we build consensus in Scotland. Well, let's assume that Scotland's voted for independence. And my offer to everybody else is, let's come together to work in all our national interests, if that is the case. And let's address the questions. Let's address the questions that have been put. Look, the simple fact of the matter is, right, well, the simple fact of the matter is, let's go through this step by step. We're in the European Union today. We're a member as part of the United Kingdom. We don't know whether or not we'll still be in transition or not. But it's been made clear by a number of figures in the European Union that Scotland today meets the criteria for membership of the European Union. And I have to say, some of the things that have been talked about. Well, I'm going to go through this.
What about the deficit, for example?
Well, the deficit is a function of what has happened within the UK, and I'm afraid there's an element. Well, because economic management is down at the end of the day.
No, I tell you, when you create jobs, it's all your responsibility.
Willie,
when there's job losses,
I'll try and answer the question, because the issue about the Maastricht criteria, what you were talking about of debt and deficit, are to do with membership of the euro, and we're not talking about membership of the euro.
So
there are other countries.
Well,
there are other countries.
As I understand it, the condition
that,
for any aspirant country that wants to join the European Union is a commitment that they would join the euro. I mean, that's one of the changes.
Yes, it is. But there's a rider to that, and that's really, really important, Adam, that there is a requirement in principle that you join the euro. But you have it's not the Blackford rider. This is actually a matter of the rules. No, I'm not. I'm actually telling you what is the reality. If you let me, it's not a new rule. It's a European rule that you have to join the exchange rate mechanism as a transition, and you have to do that for 2 years. That is voluntary. If you don't take the steps to join the exchange rate mechanism, you can't join the euro. There are a number of countries that have joined the European Union.
So let's be clear about this. So the situation would be in independent Scotland trying to get into the European Union. What would it do? Keep the pound? It's got to have its own currency.
No, you have to have your own central bank, and that's what we would do. So we'd have a central bank, we'd keep the pound, as Richard had said. No, it wouldn't. That is fantasy economics. There are a number of economic. Well, Scotland's not a poor country. We shouldn't really talk Scotland down. But the fact is, there's a number of economic tests that would be put in place, and it would be up to the Parliament to decide whether or not we then evolve to have our own currency.
Where would you make the cuts in public expenditure in order to find the reserves you would need?
You talked about the Growth Commission,
and
the Growth Commission has made it clear that we would not have had austerity under an independent Scotland. We would still have grown.
No clue on currency.
So to go back to my original question, what sort of time frame would it take in the event of Scotland being outside of the European Union as part of the UK, becoming independent and reapplying? How long would it take to get Scotland back into the European Union? As things stand today,
we're in the European Union today. If the UK is out, we meet the requirements for membership, and a number of European individuals have said that. Look, the First Minister and myself and others are meeting regularly with European governments, in my case, meeting with ambassadors in London for the EU 27.
So are you saying it will be pretty much instantaneous?
It's been made pretty clear to us that that hand of friendship is being extended to Scotland in the scenario that we become independent. The Spanish, God bless them, have even said that provided this is done constitutionally, this is a matter for the Scottish people to determine. There is no reason why there should be a delay. We are in at the moment. If we can do this, my preference would be to do this under transition, so the UK hasn't left, and we can do that in a seamless manner. We then have to go through.
Do you not think, Ian, that the last 3.5 years have been quite instructive about breaking up long-term economic partnerships? It's not as easy as the proponent. No, hold on a second. It's not as easy as proponents would make out. That people disagree, they've got different priorities, they've got different timescales, things can get caught up in processes. That's before we've even started trying to forge a new country. Just before you get out the starting blocks, the challenge is to be honest. Let's not repeat the mistakes of Brexit, let's learn the lessons.
I absolutely want to do that, and that's one of the reasons why I've said if we get to this situation, we've got to be able to pull Scotland together, and I want all of us in that bus doing that. But one of the key issues here, as you know, Willie, the European Union is a rules-based organisation, and that's the difficulty, because Theresa May tied herself up in knots with the red lines. That's what's caused the problem.
And that would
never happen with it. When you're talking about independence, you're talking about treated units, an entirely different
have to pause there, but you can have first strike when we come back in just a moment. You're watching All Out Politics live from Edinburgh.